Beauty up with wood and clay, wood and clay, wood and clay. Beauty up with wood and clay, my fair lady.
The sun came from the depths of the earth, stirring a mighty quake to mark the birth of something gargantuan. Groot? That's something we have never seen before. Toka needed to throw Alice into an infinite hell before whatever that was could be completed. But she was far too late.
Wood and clay will wash away, falling down, falling down. Beauty up with bricks and mortar, my fair lady.
The ground burst to life. A finger, then another and another, all rising up like towers. Earth, snow, and brick knitted together, manifesting a giant stone golem. Oh yeah, definitely do.
そんなバカな話があるか。なぜこいつが出てきやがる。
Toka was so angry and confused she could barely gather her thoughts. The bridge giant. The monster from the Meister's fairy tales rose from the ground, ruining Toka's plan. The giant was extremely powerful, but could only be summoned under one condition. It must be in proximity to a natural river. That was the monster's one and only condition. But the spark was nowhere near one. And on top of that, it was rising up directly between Aoko, Toko and Alice, mid-battle.
あら、あるでしょう、すぐそこに。川と呼ぶには小さな、すぐに消えてしまうものだけど。
Is it a pond? By any chance? Toko lowered her gaze. She was standing in a puddle of water. The scarred red mage was dumbfounded. That was why Alice had used Diddle Diddle before. But the bells could be replenished. They were valuable to Alice. And she had spent 5, throwing them in an intentional line for the sun drones to destroy. From there,
雪解けの流水か。
the arms of the Tim's troll rose up from the stone paving. The monster's torso alone surpassed 80 feet. His form was made entirely of stone. Previously, she had created one using the trees of a forest. However, Toka knew instantly the monster before her was at least twice as powerful.
止まれ。
She unleashed her stacked mystic eyes. They were meaningless at this stage. They had no effect on the giant. As said, mystic eyes can be countered in 2 ways. The first is to hide oneself from view of the mage. That was the standard response. The other way, however, was devilishly simple yet 100% effective. In fact, it's less of a way and more of a fact. Mystic eyes catch the target by focusing on them. However, what if the target was too large to focus on entirely? The answer was, one could barely stop a single arm. The giant, unfazed, raised his right arm and swung it down onto the ground, destroying thousands of runes. The demolished stones were then absorbed into its arm and into its mass. As the mage had said before, no matter how deep tonight, these little suns won't set. While the suns might not set, they could be crushed under the bulk of a giant's hand. The victor of the battle was decided. Aoko Aozaki closed her eyes and prepared to escape. The stray dogs began to whine, fearful of the hulking figure before them.
参ったな。私ではマインスターには勝てなかったか。まあ、そのあたりは今後の課題としよう。
呆れた。逃げられると思っているの？トウコさん。
まさか、そこまで鈍ってはいないよ、アリス。第一、逃げるとしたら、それは私の方じゃないからね。
There was no hint of bravado in Toko's tone. Even in the face of a titan she had no means of harming, her confidence was unshakable. The reason being...
ま、前座は終わりだ。来い、ベオ。
This was no longer a battle of skill. A fight for survival had begun. Snap bent Toko's fingers. And in response, a beautiful high-pitched melody floated up towards the moon. That ain't no melody. It echoed all around them, all except for the scream or whatever it was wasn't though. The spiral howl dredged up ancient primal memories. Its swords emerged from the shadows and landed next to the mage. Alice's lip trembled faintly. Not from fear, but with admiration, once she recognized the creature before her. It was a majestic golden beast, beyond the domain of both magical and phantasmal, simply divine. It was a life that should have passed from the world with the Age of Gods. A mystic derived from human wisdom, preserved by thousands of generations of hidden tradition. A recreation of a miracle that once freely walked the earth. The natural enemy of magecraft, able to crush it with ease. Quiet resignation settled over Alice's face. The golden beast charged. This time, she didn't even have a chance to admit defeat. She could hear the beast's breathing in her ear. It seemed she had been unconscious for a short time. Alice opened her eyes and took a deep breath. Each cup sent pain shooting through her body. Oh shit. Blood rose from the pit of her stomach, and she spat it onto the cold ground. When her vision returned, she was able to make out the distant sky, falling snow, and the golden wolf. The wolf panted. It stared at Alice, saliva dripping from its mouth onto her cheek. Razor-sharp fangs lined its jaws. Its fur was glossier than that of any animal she had ever seen. Brutal, knife-like jaws protruded from its massive blood-stained paws. And yet, it did not smell like a beast. Surely, the presence of such a noble creature a human would feel like the lesser animal. The battle between Alice and the wolf was over before it had begun. After destroying the troll, it baptized Alice with its wicked claws, giving her no chance. No chance to escape. Its side swipe had torn into her abandonment like a sword, carving through her clothes and flesh all the way to her heart. Even so, not once did Alice make a sound. The wolf had her pinned and stared at her face. Her limbs felt ready to break at any moment. That was the situation she found herself in. Now fully conscious, Alice stared at her enemy through pained eyes. She felt no fear. Now the cold reality sinking in. Sensing Alice's demeanor, the wolf suddenly paused, its paws still raised. They looked into each other's eyes.
そんなに血が出てるのに痛くないんだ。
The wolf's voice came as a surprise, but there was no doubt it had spoken.
それとも痛いのは平気なのかな。
No. The wolf's voice sounded innocent, almost childlike. In complete contrast to what had happened up to that point, the wolf smiled.
どっちにしろ我慢強いんだね、お姉ちゃんは。
The wolf opened its mouth wide and clamped its jaws around Alice's neck.
ベオ
Toko's tone was sharper than the wolf's fangs. The wolf froze.
トウコさん。
He let go and slowly turned his head towards the voice.
とどめは刺すなと言ったろ。余計な仕事を増やす気か、バカもん。
それはそれで楽しいのに。ああ、退屈。話に聞いた橋の巨人も結局は他の生き物と一緒だったし。
The wolf backed away from Alice, as if no longer interested in his prey. To the golden beast, she was little more than an old chew toy.
なんだ、もう意識が戻ったのか。心もタフなら体も大概だな。骨まで砕いてその程度の出血とは。マインスターの教育の賜物かい？
Barely clinging to life, Alice stared at Toko. But not a stare of hatred and defeat, but one of disbelief. Alice simply wondered why Toko had brought such a beast.
ああ、紹介が遅れたな。彼はおそらく地上で現存している最後の人狼だ。北欧の奥地に生きる彼らの一族の中に現れた生粋の原種だよ。見ての通り、先祖返りなんて言葉じゃ表せない黄金の神秘でね。名前がなかったんで分かりやすくベオウルフと呼んでいる。
ベオウルフ。
Alice's face was perplexed, even though she had wavered when she was disemboweled. Beowulf, the name of the heroic giant slayer from Danish legend. It came from Old English, a combination of honeybee and wild beast, a bear in our words.
なんでそんな
Oh, I got my
ちぐはぐな名前を。
little bit of explanation here.
ん？いや、可愛いからに決まってるだろ。
I think it's pretty cool. Perhaps because of the name, or because of the golden beast itself, Fighting the pain, Alice struggled to read Toko. In this respect, she was worse than Aoko.
ついでに説明しておくと、周りの犬どもはベオが勝手に呼び寄せたものだ。私自身、マインスターの娘がただの畜生に傷つけられるとは思ってはいないよ。今のところは。ね。
Toko's mouth twisted into a grin. Not the warm one Soujuurou saw, but the merciless smile of Victor displays a loser. The disdain in Alice's eyes turned to anger. The golden mystic. How could Toko have brought such a creature into the human world?
何？需要と供給だよ。過疎化は人間だけの問題じゃない。彼らもいい加減、昔ながらの生活には限界が来たらしくてね。話し合いの末、高額で私が買い取った。と言っても、あくまで里から出すだけの権利だがね。お察しの通り、私の髪はベオとの契約に使い切った。自分の髪を使って分身を作るより、強大な怪物を縛り付けた方がよっぽど健全。
While she was talking, Toko noticed something strange. An unusual sound. A preternatural sound that tore at the mind. What's going on? A sound that should not have existed. And it was coming from the girl's open abandonment.
もう復元が始まったか。いや、というより、これは。
何この匂い。トウコさん、なんかワクワクすること起きてない？
Gerrier's Beowulf moved closer, like a puppy examining a new toy.
見るな、あっちに行っていろ、ベオ。正気を失っても知らんぞ。
Toko shooed the mutt away with her hand. Beowulf lowered his head meekly and withdrew.
教育方針を間違ったかな。まったく、乙女の腹を見ようなんて恥を知れ、恥を。
トウコさんだって見てるじゃない。
バッカ、私は乙女だからいいんだ。
If Aoko had been here, she would have blasted them away for their impudence, just as she did against Flat Snark.
まあ、しかしむごいな。こんなになるまで放っておくとは。マインスターは人の親とは言えまいよ。
In her gloved hand, Toko ran her fingers along the wound on Alice's abandonment. A flash of pain ran through Alice's body. Alice had held in her screams, but she finally let out a long breath. She turned her face away in pain or shame.
ほら、もう肌も復元している。骨格、血管はおろか、内臓にまで施されたおびただしいまでの刻印だ。生後、肉体に魔術回路を付加することは諸刃の剣だ。呪文と自分を一体化させることにより栄唱の手間を省き、術者に多大な利点をもたらす魔術刻印。しかしそれは多ければ多いほど苦痛を伴う。青崎の刻印は腕一本分。まあ君に比べれば少ない方だな。
The magic crests Toko referred to were the inheritance of the Aozaki family, passed down by their ancestors. They can only be inherited. Aoko had received the ones that were meant for Toko.
しかしそれも良し悪しだな。右腕に刻印をした青子の痛みは残る人間の体と神秘となった右腕とが反発する程度だ。 通常の肉体が右腕を否定し、末梢にかかる痛み。精神的にも肉体的にも生じる幻痛は現在にも似て拭い去ることはできない。だがここまで来ると痛みも何もあるまい。そもそも生きている実感はあるのか？自分が人間だとまだ信じている？ああ、本当にお互い非凡な死を持つと苦労するね、アリス。
Toka took Alice's body in her arms. The wounds from Beowulf had mostly healed. Even so, her breathing was shallow, likely due to the pain. Aoko gently held the girl's face in her hand.
マインスターには恩がある。それに私の相手はあくまで青子一人だ。
Alice's lungs panned for oxygen. Toka pressed her lips to hers. The young girl wriggled, trying to escape, but Toka held her firmly. Beneath the blue moon, the chew remained frozen. Then, the sound of swallowing. Something solid slid down Alice's throat. With that, she went limp and her arm fell. After setting Alice down on her side, Toka stood up.
今のは七かまどに手を加えた私の特製品だ。そう簡単に解毒はできない。魔力を流せば体の中で暴発する仕組みになっているから気をつけなさい。ああ、口移しは私の趣味だから特に気にすることはないよ。
Wow. As she desperately clung to consciousness, Alice looked up at Toka from the ground. The disgrace from the kiss was greater than the pain she felt in her body. Toka began walking away, her golden wolf in tow. Now looked back to see Alice's hateful glare.
と、そうそう、一つ言い忘れていた。ベオが呼び寄せた野犬たちだけどね。公園の外にまだ山ほどいるんだが、困ったことに彼らは本来何を口にするべきかを思い出している。ベオの野生に刺激されたんだろう。獣はより強い獣に従うものだからな。
In a roundabout way, Toko had read Alice her last rites. In nature, it was common for the weak that could no longer move to offer their bodies up to feed the strong.
じゃあ、私は行くよ。歩くことも満足にできないだろうが、無事に帰れるといいね、アリス。
With a twisted run, the mage headed into the darkness. As her footsteps faded, the sound of growls grew louder. Alice could still barely focus her eyes. The hounds looked like monsters out of a picture book. Alice took a deep breath, her consciousness slipping away. The sky was blue, the trees were tall, the park was a graveyard. In the corner of her eye, though, Alice could just about make out the solitary phone booth. The phone rang, and that's where Soujuurou picked up. It was the second time Soujuurou had heard its voice echo through the cold foyer. Not a few minutes had passed since Alice called. He wondered what she could want. Oh, it's the second time. What she could want this time. The call persisted, determined not to leave him to his thoughts.
はい、クオンジですが。
あら、その声は宗十郎くん？
A cheery voice. Soujuurou had been expecting Alice. It was Aoko Aozaki. Somehow, Soujuurou was not surprised.
そうですけど、瞳子さん、暇なんですか？
He checked the time. He thought it was about midnight by now. No matter what the situation, Soujuurou always kept his cool. He could hear Toko trying to suppress a laugh. After taking a while to compose herself, she started talking again.
ごめんなさい。ちょっとツボ入っちゃったみたい。で、質問の開始ね。これがあんまり暇じゃないな。私も今日で終わらせる予定だから忙しいんだ。
Busy trying to kill people, I hear ya.
偶然ですね。青崎もそんなことを言ってました。
やっぱりそうね。こういう時は本当に姉妹だなって思うわ。昔からエンジンかけるタイミングだけは一緒だったから、あのことは。ところで、青崎はやめてって言ったでしょ。私も青崎だからくすぐったいのよね。そう言われるの。
Soujuurou realized she was probably right. Aozaki's words made more sense now.
まあそんなわけだから長話をする気はないんだ。単刀直入に聞くけど。
It almost sounded like she was worried about your sister's whereabouts. But the cool-headed Soujuurou had not forgotten Toko was their enemy. Keeping Aoko and Alice in mind, he decided to be evasive.
さあ、なんて答えてほしいんですか、瞳子さんとしては。
The question shifted the tone of the conversation drastically. Soujuurou could hear Toko muttering to herself in annoyance. Soujuurou was proving more quick-witted than she had anticipated. A change of tack was required.
そうね。
How about just putting
君
down
に
the
は何も
phone?
答えてほしくないっていうのが正解かな。第一印象で君を無視するのは良くない気がしてたけど、やっぱり私は宗十郎君を手にかけたくはないみたい。君はこのまま無関係でいてちょうだいね。
Her warning came from the heart. Soujuurou responded flatly, once again not giving any sign either way. It seems she wanted him to stay out of this too. Even Soujuurou could tell the girls were being kind in their own way. But who asked for their kindness?
じゃあさよならね。私は君が思ってるほど暇じゃないから。でも最後に一つだけ。君を試すようで悪いんだけど、伝えておかないと一生恨まれそうだし。なんでそうならないように責任の半分を君に押し付けちゃおうかな。
Aoko giggled. A lot to show she had him in the palm of her hand from the beginning.
さっきクオンジさんに会ってきたの。彼女から電話があったでしょ。
Her tone had not changed. She sounded as cordial as before. Even so, as soon as Soujuurou heard Alice's name, a chill ran up his spine.
彼女、今ひどい状態なんだ。満足に歩けないどころか、体中の刻印が活性化して破裂寸前。宗十郎君が骨折の痛みを知ってるなら、うまい例えようがあるんだけどね。まあ、ともかくだ。いつ気を失ってもおかしくない状態なんだけど、災難なことに怖い野犬に囲まれてるみたいなの。個人的な意見だけど、10分もあれば骨しか残らない結末になるでしょうね。
She spoke as if she was telling a joke. If it was a joke, it was in bad taste. However, Soujuurou knew this was anything but. She was telling the truth. He had not heard of dogs attacking anyone in town, but the noise he heard while on the phone with Alice suddenly made sense. Dogs, a pack of them, no doubt about it. They were surrounding their prey. Why had he not cottoned on sooner? Squeezing the receiver in his hand, Soujuurou cursed himself. Alice had been calling for help. Even when backed into a corner, she had not wanted to involve Soujuurou. Still, she needed help. That way she said his name so lightly.
場所は
He spoke abruptly. Even though he knew Toka was the enemy, he was confident she would answer him. That was the reason she called.
教えてあげてもいいけど、そうした瞬間に君は私の敵になるのよ。その覚悟はある？
Soujuurou realized what was happening. He was being tested. By ignoring Alice, he would be confirming that he did not want to get involved. But if he decided to save her...
それで場所は
Soujuurou ignored Toka's question. Of course, he was not prepared to become her enemy, but he was even less prepared to let Alice die. He had lost his ability to think sensibly, not that he was particularly good about that to begin with. Still, he would not waste any time in deliberation. He would simply go with his instincts. It was one of the few times he had felt pride since coming down from the mountains.
そう。ちょっと残念だな。私は本当に君が気に入ってたのに。まあ、こうなることは分かってたけどね。場所はヤシロギの森林公園。受話器の下に地図があるでしょ。この前帰りがけにしおりを挟んでおいたから、それを参考にすること。
Okay, thanks.
繰り返すようだけど、10分持てば幸運。その後は1分ごとに奇跡の価値が上がるような状況よ。今の彼女は。
As she listened, Soujuurou's expression turned to one of irritation. Misaki and Yashirogi were one station apart. How long would it take to get to the station from the mansion? Usually just under 12 minutes. By the time he got off the train at Yashirogi, nearly 30 minutes would have passed.
地図の上じゃ近いのに、区画整理された交通手段は不便よね。けど、急げば最終の電車には間に合うわ。ここで諦めた方が賢明だけど、君はもう私の敵だから。どっちにしたって、後悔のないようにね。
The line went dead. Soujuurou, not Toka, had hung up the phone. He memorized the map and then made for the door. With no time to grab his coat, he ran out into the snowy winter night with the clothes he had on. All that remained in the hall was a discarded map. It showed Misaki City. It was about 10 miles from the mansion to the nature park. 5 if you went in a straight line, but the streets were not that forgiving. 4 inches on the map, but so much farther in reality. For the first time, Soujuurou cursed the town. Everything's bringing the worst out of him, holy Jesus. Alice's injuries were not limited to her abandonment. The wolf had punched a hole straight through her back. To her back. Wow. Crushing her lower vertebrae and leaving both of her legs paralyzed. Though her magic rests were repairing the damage, it would likely take another hour before recovery. At the very least, her heart inside her arms still worked. Although, after crawling along the ground to the phone booth, those two were failing her. As the crests healed her wounds, a searing heat ran through her body that threatened to overwhelm her. It was as if her body was no longer her own, like she was transforming into another creature. The poison throbbing through her open wounds hurt emotionally more than physically. She was used to pain, but she could not accept this disquieting feeling. Not that she had any intention to. The moment she did, it would be her last. Alice wrestled with the discomfort from her abandonment and her magic rests. And with her consciousness holding on by a thread, she took the phone in her hand. It was unlikely Aoko would be there to pick up. Even so, with the 3 dogs gathering around the booth, she had to try. It was Soujuurou who picked up. Alice knew she was better off just hanging up, but his name slipped out of her mouth. After pausing and fighting with herself for some time, an image of the innocent boy came to mind, and she hung up. Her instincts had won out. She could not let him get involved. Unfortunately, though, and not just because she was an innocent bystander, it was more than that. To Alice, Soujuurou appeared that day because he was merely in the wrong place at the wrong time. Only the lightest of breaths passed her lips. Above her, the moon began to blur. Snow was falling again, so close yet so far. The dogs began hurling themselves at the phone booth with a chorus of hungry snarls. Tunk tunk. She took one last deep breath and closed her eyes. Glass, an unusual material for a coffin. But the girl knew, in some center of her mind, that she had made the right choice to not ask the boy for help. Some time passed. A peculiar sight came into view. A field of wildflowers. The clear sky was too blue. The flowers, so numerous to make the field look barren. The sight was so dazzlingly beautiful, she wished she could look away. This was probably all thanks to Father Winter. The cold wind carried the scent of a paradise far removed, untamed by man or beast. It was a glimpse of the fields beyond winter. One could be forgiven for thinking they were the afterlife. Come to think of it, she remembered how funerals were sad, yet always beautiful. She cried. She made an incongruous whine, a sound of life. Her breathing was strained and erratic. Hollow and useless was the heart that she once used to fend off pain. It was as though she was in the space between disconnected body and mind. A crying woman and a silent child. High was the sky, deep was the forest, and moving were the people. No footsteps or voices of salvation came. Who was that looking innocently up at the sky in the stillness? As she came to, Alice was going up a familiar hill. The cold night air had all but frozen her hands or feet. She shook, as you would expect from someone whose abandonment had been torn apart.
Shizuki.
She could barely comprehend that she was being carried slowly up. Shizuka. Soujuurou had Alice in his back and was silently ascending the slope. His calm eyes seemed to be suffering from the bitter cold. He did not seem to be dressed for the time of year. Not even a coat. His exposed neck and hands were ice cold.
どうしてここにいるの
Alice asked, still slumped over his frame. She tried to move, but to no avail. The last thing she wanted was to rest her entire weight on someone else.
瞳子さんから電話があった。アリスが危ないって。 青崎はともかく、アリスは意地を張りすぎだ。あの状況で助けを呼ばないのはどうかしてる。そりゃ自分が言っても何もできなかっただろうけど。
Soujuurou spoke with a scolding tone, his eyes kept firmly ahead. His words were directed at himself rather than the girl on his back.
しずきくんは関係ないもの。
だろうね。けどこれで関係はできた。館に着いたら話してもらうぞ。
Soujuurou focused on climbing the hill. The slope would get steeper from here to the mansion. The thought of Soujuurou climbing the steep hill with her on his back surprised Alice.
降りるわ。もう大丈夫だから。
お腹をむき出しでかい？この方が少しは暖かいよ。それにアリスは薪より軽い。山じゃこの程度は朝飯前だから気にしないでくれ。息が上がっているのは公園まで急いだからだし。まあその意味はなかったんだが。
なぜ？
俺が着いたら犬はさっさと散っていった。初めから瞳子さんはそういうつもりだったんだ。アリスをどうにかするつもりもなければ時間制限もなかった。喜ぶべきことなんだろうけど。
Soujuurou said dejectedly, but he was wrong. Notoka did not want to kill Alice per se. She would not have cared if she had died. At least that was the way Alice saw it. She did not know how long it took Soujuurou to get to the park, but if he had not come, the phone booth would have collapsed and she would be dead. Alice did her best to suppress her thoughts and feelings. She felt silly at the thought of correcting him, and it would matter little anyway. The thought of her trying to thank him was more painful than her open wounds.
もしかして公園からずっと。
仕方ないだろう。電車終わってたんだから。タクシーを使えばよかったんだけど、あいにく持ち合わせがなくて。ほんと今日ほどお金の不便さを思い知った日はない。
For the first time today, Soujuurou let out a sigh. There was no point taking a break. He had already traveled close to 6 miles like this. Perhaps the fatigue was getting to him. Soujuurou was more upset with his own weakness and the difficulty of the trek.
でもそれを言うならお金の大切さじゃない。
使えるものがあるのにお金がないだけで使えないんだから、それって不便って言わないか
？The innocence of his question made Alice briefly forget her pain. She too felt distant from the real world. But compared to the boy carrying her, she felt like a regular citizen.
何かあなたらしいわ。
Alice smiled to herself. As Alice rested her hand, something soft touched her cheek. The color Aoko had given him.
館に着いたら着替えるんだ。お腹の血も拭って、落ち着いたら今で話そう。瞳子さんに言わせれば、俺もこれで敵らしいから。
With those words hanging in the air, they reached the top of the hill. The gate in the woods stood before them. Beyond it, illuminated by the pale moonlight, stood the mansion. Looking up at it, the girl felt a little disappointed. If only it would have lasted longer. And natural reaction, yet she could not place where her sadness was coming from. Once she entered the mansion, Alice slid off Soujuurou's back and walked towards the west wing. The west wing was her domain. However, after only a few steps, she collapsed to the floor.
アリス
Soujuurou rushed over to her, but she raised her hand. Her gesture told him he was not to come closer. He stopped in his tracks, a concerned look on his face. Her pale skin gleamed with sweat. Her expression uncharacteristically strained.
平気。部屋に戻るぐらいの力は戻ったわ。服を繕ってくるから、あなたはここにいて。すぐに戻ってくるから。そうしたら。
The pained look in Alice's eyes told Soujuurou he would talk later. He knew he could not stop her. Soujuurou reminded himself that she was the one in pain, not him.
それじゃあ戻ってきたら話を聞かせてくれ。
Alice took a deep breath before slowly disappearing down the corridor. And an eventful 5 minutes passed. Alice returned wearing a fresh set of black clothes, but her complexion remained pallid. With a small sigh, she carefully leaned against a pillar in the foyer and slid down it until she was sitting.
アリス、傷が痛むなら無理せず横になった方がいい。
Soujuurou sat across from her on the cold floor.
傷はもう痛まないわ。横になる必要もない。この体の異常は七かまどを飲まされたせいだから。どうあっても治らないもの。
じゃあせめて毛布とか。
いいから気遣いはしないで。ここなら寒さも関係ないから。
She seemed to be telling the truth. Soujuurou remembered Aoko telling him that as long as Alice is inside the mansion, she would be comfortable.
あったかいのならいい。それで七かまどっていうのは。
薬草の一種よ。7回かまどで焼いても燃え残ることから付けられた名前で、紅葉は魔除け。普通の人には良くない程度だけど、私や青子には少し厄介ね。体内での魔力生成そのものに抵抗されてしまうから手の打ちようがない。
毒と思っていいのか。
いえ、本来は薬草よ。今は傷を治すために魔力を使っているから苦しいけど、傷が完治すればおとなしくなるわ。魔術さえ使わなければ七かまども反応しないから。単純な話、七かまどを消化するまで私は役には立たないだけ。
Alice paused. She decided not to see how many days that would take.
別にしずきくんが心配することじゃないわ。こんなの血が流れる程度の痛みだから。
She worked hard to keep her tone calm. Aoko barely blinked when she was striking the back. The mages must have an unusually high pain threshold. Soujuurou was surprised and bewildered by what she said. If wounds didn't count as long as the pain wasn't too bad, then nothing would hurt except an injury that killed you.
わかった。話をするのは明日にしよう。今日はとにかく体を休めてほしい。
明日になっても私の容体は変わらないけど。
いいんだ、それでも。アリスはもっと体を大事にしてくれ。
He stood up.
部屋まで送るよ。それとも今で休むか？西館には入ったことはないからアリスの部屋もわからないし。
ここでいいわ。青子を待たなくちゃいけないから。
Alice looked up at the skylight. The moonlight illuminated her pained face. The foyer looked like it belonged to a rundown castle. Oh, the moon at Alice seemed more vivid in reality. Where did their strength come from? Soujuurou stared at her. Without understanding the significance of Alice's gaze, he turned his gaze to the night sky, powerless as it was. For the third time that night, the silence was broken by the sound of the phone ringing. Before Soujuurou could move, a thin shadow bolted across the foyer. By the time he realized it was the weekend Alice, she had already taken the receiver in her hand.
Aoko.
It was the first time Soujuurou had heard Alice sound concerned. Her tone was infinitely graver than when she was enduring her own pain. Alice's question received only a short response from the voice on the other end. It was a voice more frail than Alice's, like a flickering flame about to turn to smoke.
ごめん、やられた。
The phone was far from Soujurou's ears, but the words he picked up were very unlike her. Despite saying so little... No, because she had said so little. The weight of Aoko's defeat struck Soujuurou hard. Alice silently set the receiver down. Only moments before, her body had been fighting the pain. Now it felt stronger than ever. It was like a scarecrow transforming into a beautiful stone statue. Seeing this, Soujuurou finally understood. Alice's expression when she looked at the moon had come from her trying to accept an immutable reality.